What is up? I'm Ben Allen, and I will be your host today of 3 in the Key. Today, we will be looking at what is going on in the sports world, and we'll have a talk via Skype with the University of Michigan basketball beat writer, Simon Kaufman. And he'll talk a little bit about the NCAA scene post-Sweet 16 matchup of KU and Michigan from a year ago. Also, Farzin and Vousoughian and Andrew Curtis will join me over at the bar later to talk about KU basketball senior night tonight against Texas Tech. But first, let's get you up to date on what you missed. If you haven't heard yet, you might really be living in the dark, but King James went for 61 points against the Bobcats the other night. As if being a Bobcats fan wasn't bad enough, now you have the king of basketball come in and basically make you give up all hope on the game of basketball. If I was a Bobcats fan, I'd be looking up at Mr. Jordan right now upstairs and being like, where are you at? Are you going to come suit up for us and try to slow down this guy? LeBron has now pushed himself back into the MVP talk after the run by Kevin Durant. Maybe NBA players will start wearing their mask more often after LeBron James hurt his nose, and it is definitely working for him. A sleazeball. That's what Tigers infielder Ian Kinsler called his old GM John Daniels. He also hopes that the Rangers go 0-162. Kinsler, who was traded to the Tigers in exchange for Prince Fielder, expressed his dislike for Daniels and said that he was the big reason why Nolan Ryan felt the need to leave the franchise. I get being upset, and I get voicing your opinion on things, but that does not make it ultimately a good thing to do these things and ultimately look like a sore loser from a trade swap. The first openly gay player in the major sports in the social media era will stay a little bit longer in the league. Jason Collins was signed to another 10-day deal the other day to keep him with the Nets. Collins scored 3 points and had 5 rebounds during his first 10-day deal and is coming off the bench as depth behind Andre Bloch and Mason Plumlee. There were a #1 team in the nation beginning of the season, but now the Kentucky Wildcats are in the last spot of the top 25. The team that was bound for a comeback this season has done all but that. The team squeaked by unranked Alabama last night and now faces the possibility of not even getting a top 5 seed in the NCAA tournament. The question now for Calipari is, are you kicking your guys out the door too quickly? This top recruiting class, are they thinking too early about playing in the NBA season next year before this season is even over with? But does Calipari really care? Will this be the new stigma with young players? We'll talk about that a little bit later in the show. Speaking of one and dones, the possible first overall pick in this year's upcoming NBA draft is also done. Joel Embiid is done until the Big 12 tournament, and he will be a no-go against Texas Tech and West Virginia to finish up the season. Embiid is having a great first season, averaging about 12 points and 8 rebounds a game, and according to all indication, this is more of a precautionary type move on Self's part rather than a real fear of serious injury to his back. Now that you're all caught up to date, stay tuned for Simon Kaufman of the University of Michigan to talk college hoops. Stay tuned. Well, welcome back. Now joining us via Skype is the University of Michigan basketball beat writer, Simon Kaufman. Simon, how are you doing there, bud?
I'm doing great, Ben. Thanks for having me on.
Well, thank you so much for taking the time off your spring break to be able to talk to us just for a little bit. So, we'll jump right into things here. A little less than a year ago, your Michigan Wolverines were on a last-second shot from now point guard of the Utah Jazz, Trey Burke. He sank a 35-foot-plus shot to knock the Jayhawks and stunned them back into what was one of the most surprising games for Jayhawk fans after watching it from that game. Now, as a perspective of a Michigan student and a Michigan fan and a Michigan media member at that point also, what was it like watching that game?
Well, I was just a fan at that time. I wasn't writing about the team, so it was just a crazy game. We were pretty upset the way that game was going late in the game. Michigan, down 10 pretty late in the game, and then for them to be able to turn that around, and just when Trey hit that shot basically from John Beilein's lap, we just went nuts. We never would have expected that, and when he hit that shot, it kind of looks like, Michigan might be able to pull this out. That really shifted the momentum. It was just a pretty crazy March for that team in general. Not a team a lot of people had picked going that far. But I think that game was kind of the pinnacle for them, showed what they were capable of.
Where were you watching that game at that time? I was down in Dallas at the time, but were you back with a bunch of Michigan buddies at that point?
Yeah, I was watching with a bunch of Michigan buddies. We were watching in one of the dorms. It was Saturday night, I think. So we were prepping to go out one way or the other. We went out a little happier than we thought we were with about 4 minutes left. in the game, but you could just kind of hear the whole campus jump for a second when that shot went in.
Okay. So now looking at this season, obviously you lost Tim Hardaway Jr. and you lost Trey Burke. Now you're looking at a guy like Mitch McGarry. He went to high school with a guy who actually went to my high school in Massachusetts at one point, Melvin Edgin. And he broke out in the tournament last season, had an amazing, amazing season, and now he's been hurt most this season. What has the impact been with like not having him in the lineup most of the time?
Well, yeah, absolutely. McGarry kind of came onto the scene in the tournament last year. I think he averaged like 14 points, 10 rebounds, double-double during March last season. And, he probably could have gone, if he were to go to the draft, probably, first-round pick. He decided to come back along with Glenn Robinson. And despite losing Trey and Tim, you're thinking this could be another great season for Michigan. Then you hear early on, he's got some back problems. He plays a couple of games early on. He looks fine, but then they decide to shut him down for surgery. And, Michigan fans kind of hold their breath. But I think one of the things that's been great, not to undermine anything McGarry does, but the team never really, felt bad for themselves losing him. They saw, okay, we're going to lose McGarry. Who's the next man up? Kind of a next man up philosophy. Mm-hmm. And they've just gotten huge contributions from, sophomores Stauskas, Robinson, and LeVert. And, they've changed the offense a little. They're not so much reliant on big men in the paint like McGarry would have given you. And they've become a team that can just shoot lights out from the perimeter. And that's where they've been getting a lot of their scoring. So I think in some regards it's helped them.
But now, what's gotten into Stauskas? Because I remember last year thinking, oh, he was just the guy on the outside who was able to knock down shots. He's averaging ridiculous point numbers this season. What has really been the biggest thing for him in which he was able to step up from last season and really go into a role of being a scorer?
Yeah, well, last season, everyone knew this guy was a shooter. You leave him open on the perimeter, he's going to knock down shots. Mm-hmm. But he stayed over the summer. Him and sophomore guard Karis LeVert, they both stayed at Michigan over the summer, and they were working out with strength and conditioning coaches. I think Stauskas put on about 20 pounds. And, the big thing, it's kind of a cliche amongst the Michigan media, but he's not just a shooter anymore. He has the ability to drive, get to the rim, and that's really changed his game. He's primarily still a shooter. He's averaging 17 points, and he shoots, 46% behind the arc. He's always a threat with the ball in his hands, but I think his ability to go to the hoop has made him even more dangerous as a shooter because, you can't just hang on him, around the perimeter because he's not afraid to drive to the hoop.
Okay. Now, obviously, we touched on Glenn Robinson a little bit earlier, and throwing Tim Hardaway into that mix and Horford, these are guys that all have famous relatives. All of their brothers or dads played in the NBA and had successful careers. What has it been like having those family members around the school, and what do you think it has done for them as players in the collegiate level?
Yeah, well, specifically, I think with Robinson was another guy that, had a great year last year, and he could have potentially declared for the draft and been probably a high first or at least a first round or early second round pick playing in the NBA right now. But he decided he said last year that he thinks he still has more to prove, and he came back. And I think some of that is having his dad, big dog. I think he feels a little bit of pressure to live up to that. And I think at the beginning of the season, it was a little disappointing. Not that he wasn't putting up good numbers, but we kind of thought that this was going to be, Glenn Robinson, his offense to lead. And it turned out being Stauskas' offense and LeVert's offense. And Robinson, he's kind of streaky one game to the next. I think a huge turning point for him was just the other night at Purdue. Michigan's trailing the whole game. And he knocks down a shot at the buzzer at Purdue, where his dad played for 2 years, to send Michigan on. And we actually had a chance to talk with Glenn Robinson Jr., his dad, after the game. And he was saying he always likes those games because he's rooting for both teams. His alma mater, but also, his son's Michigan team. So it was the ideal finish for him. But I think that little bit of confidence is going to be big for him going forward come the tournament.
And obviously, we just touched on it a little bit more. But the team right now, they have always been known for this rivalry with Michigan State, and they knocked them off last time they played. What is the current state of the rivalry between Michigan and Michigan State?
Yeah, well, the Michigan State rivalry, just like any university and state school rivalry, it's always going to be big. It's always going to be huge. It's always one of the most anticipated games of the season, and I think after being a little humbled on the gridiron several months back, Michigan was excited to get the chance to settle things on the hardwood, and they went into East Lansing, which is just a vicious atmosphere. And they put down Michigan State there. And then just 2 weeks ago, they beat Michigan State at home. And they were both pretty convincing wins. Given the game away, Michigan State was missing some of its players. And actually after the home game, too, they were missing Dawson. And Tom Izzo, who's nothing to take away from him. He's one of the greatest coaches. But he harps on that a lot. And I think that's one of the biggest differences between maybe him and Coach Beilein, is that Izzo, in the press conference for a while, he talked about it for several minutes, how tough a season it's been for them, losing so many of their players. And, absolutely, it's been tough for them. But Beilein, somebody goes down, he'll mention it, but they have a next man up philosophy, like I said, and they're not worried about who's sitting on the bench injured. They're worried about, what's the best combination of guys they can put out there on any given night to win.
Certainly, and I think that's what a lot of coaches are doing right now. So touching a little bit closer to home here out in Kansas, what's your opinion on this year's Jayhawks?
I think the Jayhawks are actually, a similar situation to Michigan this year. I think they have identical records. What are they sitting at? 22-7.
Yeah.
I think they almost have identical records in conference. Michigan's 14-3. I think the Jayhawks are 13-3. But where you're coming back and you're a young team. And that's what Michigan did. That's what Kansas is doing this year. They lost McLemore last year, and so it's having to find a way to replace, in your case, his 16 points per game, and they're doing it. They're doing it with a young team. You have, I think, the starting lineup, save for one, is freshmen and sophomores, and I think it's just a really exciting team. You've got some great scorers. Andrew Wiggins, obviously any night he could go off. But then you also have someone like Embiid who can put up 10 points a game, but also grab, 8 rebounds a game. So I think what Michigan and KU's programs have been able to do this year is, we lost a lot of talent last year, but what are we going to do this year to replace that talent? Michigan lost, basically 30 points in 70 minutes a game. So how are you going to replace that 70 minutes and 30 points a game? You're not going to find another Trey Burke, another Tim Hardaway. You're not going to pick those up right away. You're not going to get another McLemore necessarily. So you kind of have to do it by committee. And I think that's what both of these programs have done an exceptional job of this year.
All right, Simon, we'll get you out on one more question here. Who's going to win it all this year in the NCAA tournament?
In the NCAA tournament, I think
Put you on the spot here.
Yeah. I like the way Kansas has been playing. I think they definitely stand a chance. I think Florida too. One team that I think is gonna maybe surprise some people, maybe not. But I think Wichita State is gonna be one of those one seeds that gets booted early. I think just given their schedule, they've had a really easy schedule. I think that'd be an easy upset to pick. But I'm excited to see definitely them play some tougher competition. But you know what? I don't want to appease too much the KU crowd, so I'm gonna pick Florida, bringing home the hardware at the end of the year.
All right. Well, right now that's two of us in that same category because I'm thinking the same thing with Florida. Simon, thanks so much for taking your time out of your spring break to be able to talk to us. And when we return, Andrew Curtis and Farzin will be joining us. So Simon, have a good rest of your break.
All right. Thanks a lot, Ben.
All right. We'll be right back. Welcome back to 3 in the Key, and now joining me is two of the finest radio show hosts in the planet, and Andrew Curtis and Farzin Vousoughian. Andrew was just on a few weeks ago, and, well, Farzin is
making my debut.
And he's making his debut tonight.
Rookie.
So he's a rookie. We co-host a radio show together on Mondays. It's called Jayhawk Zone, so if you ever get a chance to listen to 90.7 at about 7 o'clock on Mondays, you'll be hearing our voices. All right, well, guys, you guys are both seniors here at the university, and I know you guys have really enjoyed it. You've been here, you'll have one more semester after this year is over, but this is your last year, essentially a full year, and this is going to be your third year here, right?
My second year.
It's technically full second year.
Yeah.
So, should probably know that considering I just wrote a paper on you. So obviously I'm in good standings right now by memory. But we'll go ahead and jump right into it. What has been your favorite moment in which you guys have been sitting in the field house and you guys have experienced as watching basketball?
It all points to February 25th, 2012, the border war finale against
the
the
spot.
University of Missouri. If you were in the building for that game, it's one of those days you'll just never forget, and it's going to be hard for anything that I experienced live at a sporting event to top that, just because the way the game went with KU coming back from being 19 down in the second half. The Thomas Robinson block, 127 decibels, forcing overtime. I mean, it's never going to be topped for me, even as far as in the future games that I cover. It's going to take a lot to one-up that one, because I don't think I'm never going to forget it. And the way that KU came back in that game, you just kind of had that vibe when you were in the building that they were going to come back and find a way to win in the field house, because, let's just face it, they were the alpha dog in that rivalry, especially when it came to basketball. And so, like I said, February 25th, 2012 will forever be close to my heart.
Now that block, everyone knows that block, and I think people that aren't even KU fans or not Missouri fans, they know what it was like when that happened. You just hear this
It's like
roar.
time just stopped and everybody went nuts.
Okay. So it had to have been the most powerful second possibly in, athletic history for you watching probably then, right? That one particular point, the block?
I would say so, just because I was there in person, I witnessed it, and that little split second changed everything, and KU already had all the momentum, but you knew at that point, once they forced overtime, that the game was pretty much in Kansas's hands, because momentum's a powerful thing, especially when you're on your home court, and Kansas certainly had all of it going into overtime in that game.
What about you, Farzin?
For me personally, I didn't attend a men's basketball game before until last year when I announced one for KGHK. So I announced a lot of women's games last year. I only announced one men's game, and that was the game against TCU at home. It was the first time I was at Allen Fieldhouse ever for a men's game. And like I said, just seeing the fans rush into their seats, and just the vibe and how loud it was. You mentioned the decibels, just how loud it gets. I mean, it gets pretty crazy in there. For those who've never attended a game before at Allen Fieldhouse for a men's game, I finally got a vibe for what it's like to be at Allen Fieldhouse for a basketball game for the Jayhawks. So it was definitely a big moment, and being able to cover a few more and attending some as a fan this year, I definitely like being at Allen Fieldhouse. It's one of those things that you're going to definitely miss as a student.
Okay, and now everyone knows that senior night, basically they have the seniors come out after the game, win or lose, and they have them talk. Last year we had amazing seniors. There was Jeff Withey, there was Travis Relaford, there was Kevin Young, and there was Elijah Johnson. So there were some pretty powerful speeches going on. This year, it's a little bit of a different senior class. We're looking at Nico Roberts, we're looking at Justin Wesley, and we're looking at Tarek Black, who only has played one season here as a grad student. What are those speeches going to be like tonight?
I think Nico's is definitely going to be probably the most emotional out of the three, because he's been here 4 years. Justin Wesley, I believe, has been here 3 years. He transferred from Lamar his freshman year. He's related to Keith Langford, the former Kansas player. And Nico's been here the whole time, and his father's an assistant coach. He's really put a lot into the program, Obviously hasn't gotten a whole lot of playing time in his career. This will actually be the first start of his career, as well as Justin Wesley. But I think he's definitely going to have the most emotional, just because he's been here the longest, and the ties he has with his father here and everything. And by the way, just a little anecdote, Kansas has won the last 29 senior nights.
Oh my goodness.
We take it
So
seriously
there
here.
hasn't been a lot of fear of them speaking after a
No
loss.
awkwardness.
No awkward loss talk. Well, guys, So, okay, well, what do you think about
I've got to go with Tarek Black. It's his only sole season here at KU. But the thing about Tarek Black you've got to remember is the leadership that he brought. He was a starter at the beginning of the season, but it wasn't about Tarek Black and making that switch to Kansas. He put others before himself. He helped Joel Embiid. He showed Joel Embiid the ropes. There was all this hype about Joel Embiid and how big of a freshman he is, possibly going to go to the NBA this summer. But the thing about Tarek Black is he showed Embiid the ropes. He taught him everything, and eventually Embiid took over and took Black's spot. And that's huge. As a senior to be able to do that and put away that selfishness and put others before yourself, that's huge. I think the thing about Black, he's not the greatest player on the floor. I know his fouls have been a problem for him this year, but players have benefited from his presence. Whether they're freshmen, sophomores, or other seniors. Everyone's learned a lot from Tarek Black, and I think everyone's going to end up this season. By the time the season's over with, Tarek Black's going to be one of those guys that all of those guys want to keep in touch with.
And he'll be a guy who'll be pretty crucial, obviously, during the hopeful NCAA tournament run because he'll be experienced being a fifth-year guy. And even though he's not been a Jayhawk for a very long time.
He's played in the tournament at Memphis.
Yeah. And he'll be a guy that's got that experience, and he'll be able to get those younger players back.
And tonight, with the tradition being that all the seniors start, obviously, like I mentioned, it's the first start of their careers for Wesley and Nico Roberts. Tarek Black started quite a bit of games at the beginning of the season before Joel Embiid slipped into the starting lineup. And then I think there was the TCU game, Embiid was out with an injury, and now Embiid is resting the final 2 games with a back injury. So Black, by default, starting anyways over Embiid because Embiid's unable to go. So look for him to take advantage of those minutes because he's obviously a crucial part of the rotation as basically he's always been the first man, big man off the bench. And look for him to get 25 to 30 minutes and really relish the opportunity tonight as we move forward in March.
Who are the other 2 starters?
It's probably going to be Andrew Wiggins for sure, and then probably I want to say Nadir Tharp. I mean,
they need to have a ball handler out there.
He's been really good with his ball distribution this year, and they're going to need him out there in the front court.
I don't think Nico could handle the ball regardless, though. I mean, honestly speaking, I don't think he could handle the ball as the main on guard.
And you look at Nadir Tharp too, and he would be the next class down as far as being a junior.
True.
So you definitely want your point guard in there starting. And Andrew Wiggins, obviously, there's been a lot of speculation about him leaving for the NBA after this season. So definitely, like you said, Wiggins will probably start just because it's probably not officially his last game in Allen Fieldhouse, but everybody pretty much knows.
It's a preconceived notion.
Exactly. Yeah. And Joel Embiid, unfortunately, like I mentioned, is out and likely has already played his last game in Allen Fieldhouse. I mean, there's a chance that he comes back.
Possibly.
Nobody really knows what's going to happen for sure yet, but
Certainly.
You just don't know. It's an unfortunate circumstances that he's hurt.
Okay, now we're going to move a little bit into a different topic, but having to do with collegiate athletes. There has been a lot of talk lately, and it's something that's been conversed on a lot of radio shows lately, but that there is not being enough time spent in the classroom by a lot of athletes. There has been an issue that you see so many guys basically who know they're going to be one and dones go in, they don't feel like they have to do anything, and then by the time that they're ready to graduate, they're going into the league, and they're just not prepared, as a mature adult to be able to thrive in the league. What do you guys think of this situation right now as it pertains to, do you think that these guys should be in the NCAA? Should they play in college longer?
Oh, well, it's kind of tough. I mean, Jermaine O'Neal said, if a guy at the age of 18 can go right to the Army, why can't a college athlete go right to the NBA or the NFL or whatever the case may be? I think you've just got to consider, one of the things that you look at with these guys, just what they want to do. A lot of them want to get in the pros. A lot of them want to go out there and make money. I mean, it's no secret. Andrew Wiggins and Joel Embiid definitely want to get the cash. All those NBA scouts are going to be showing that right in their face, saying, "Hey, look, that money's going to be right there for you. You're going to be taken on the top 5." But there needs to be that classroom presence. Those guys need to be out there in the classroom. There's all this talk about whether or not these kids are really in the classroom. There's been a lot of research with the night school, the night commission, and all those things that kind of factor in. I think these students are in the classroom. Charlie Weiss has really done a good job with that with his team this year. I think Bill Self is trying to control that as well. A lot of students, they go to the classroom, but are they really focusing just as much as the next kid, right? Next to him, who's not getting that full-time scholarship and all. So I think those are some of the factors that need to be considered. To answer your question, though, I don't think they need to be there longer. If they choose the option to drop out and go to the NBA, go for it. That's their choice, and that's how it's been for a while.
Okay.
Mike Silver, the new NBA commissioner who just took over for Adam Silver. I'm sorry. He just took over for David Stern as commissioner of the NBA, and he wants to expand it to 2 years after college instead of the one.
There was discussion, but it should be a 2-year thing.
But nothing's really progressed to this point. But I think that would definitely benefit college basketball and the NBA, but especially with the academic side of college basketball, because when you're in school for 1 year, one and done, essentially some of these players that are college basketball players, once you get to April or so after the season's over, if they know they're one and done, they commit to the NBA, they almost stop going to classes, some of them. That's what I've heard anyway, just pure speculation. Whereas if you're staying in school 2 years at the minimum, or possibly 3, which the NFL rule is 3 years after high school before you can enter the draft. You're more dedicated to your academics because you know that you're going to have to keep doing well and strive to improve as a student in order to keep going with your scholarship. You certainly want to get good grades with that aspect.
One of the things you've got to consider, I think this was the case with Macklemore. Some players, they're redshirt their freshman year, and then they play their sophomore year when academically they're a sophomore, but on the court they're considered a freshman. So some players are in school 2 years, but they're only playing 1 academic year.
And plus, if you go to school for 2 years or possibly 3, then you have the opportunity to come back and pursue your degree later on. Like Shaq did that with LSU. 15 plus years after he was done with school, he came back and completed his undergrad. So
certainly. Well, guys, thank you so much for coming in and being able to talk to us a little bit about senior night. Hopefully, you guys are calling the game tonight. Hopefully, you guys enjoyed that last time in Allen Fieldhouse, being able to call this game. And I wish you guys good luck in your endeavors afterwards. That's all we have for today. Special thanks to Simon Kaufman for coming in and obviously for these guys being here today. We are going to be on a 2-week break going into spring break, but look forward to seeing you when we come back in session. I'm Ben Allen, and this has been 3 in the Key. Have a great evening.